Bible Source Text Podcast. Today we're going to talk about Noah. Now the story of Noah spans 4 chapters in Genesis, and so I'm going to attempt to just power through and do 4 chapters at once. Probably going to be a longer episode compared to some of the past episodes. But yes, we are going to talk about Genesis chapters 6 through 10. So let's jump right in here. Genesis chapter 6 starts with, "Now it came about when mankind began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful. They took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of mankind, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." This reference to the Nephilim is something that has been debated and discussed among biblical scholars. The fact of the matter is, it's not really explained in detail here. This term that's used is directly transliterated from the Hebrew, and you've got a group known as the sons of God having children with the daughters of men. Now, this has been interpreted in various ways. Who are the sons of God? Some have taken that to mean angels, and indeed the term son of God is used to refer to angels at different points. But similar phraseology is also used throughout ancient Near Eastern texts to refer to demigods or people with divine descent, which is very common in ancient Near Eastern king lists. It was also found in ancient Egypt, the belief that the pharaoh was descended from the gods. So some have interpreted this simply to mean that the sons of God in the story are the kings, the rulers, the strong men who were in charge at the time. Some have interpreted this as sort of a parody of heroic figures in other cultures. The Bible seems to not hold these sort of heroic strong men in high regard, which is different than in most other ancient Near Eastern cultures. We have a similar vibe in the story of Samson later on, in which there's a sense of satire or parody of stories about strong men like Gilgamesh or later Hercules, But let's not get ahead of ourselves. One could draw a connection between the Nephilim and the Sumerian Apkallu, the 7 wise sages in Sumerian myth, which are in different stories of the Sumerians, interpreted as gods or demigods or just simply old heroes and kings. But the point being that they were powerful and also feared. Could this be a memory of old kings taking many wives from among the commoners and exploiting their power over others? Possibly. If we look to non-biblical texts, the book of 1st Enoch seems to mirror this passage and indeed uses very similar language to this passage. It is worth noting the book of Enoch is much later than the book of Genesis, possibly as long as 300 years later. So it's likely the book of Enoch took this text from Genesis and then tried to sort of expand on it. Kind of makes the book of Enoch like sort of a Bible fan fiction in a sense. Point is, the book of Enoch comes in with this idea of angels impregnating human women to create a race of giants. These giants being portrayed as violent and gluttonous and mistreating the humans. Eventually the humans rebel. That is not found here in Genesis, but it is an idea that has worked its way into popular consciousness and into commentaries about who the Nephilim are. There's a Manichaean text as well called the Book of Giants, which again is I believe even later than the Book of Enoch, and uses a lot of these ideas from the Book of Enoch, though it also adds the idea of the giants then further impregnating animals to create monsters. One could get the image of like some of these old, Greek mythological chimeras and things coming from that. So you get into these extra biblical texts trying to expand on this very cryptic reference that we see here in Genesis chapter 6. Genesis simply tells us these were the mighty men of old, men of renown. The idea of them as giants does move into sort of the popular culture. In the 19th century, you had the Cardiff Giant hoax, in which someone claimed to have found a mummified skeleton of one of these Nephilim, which was eventually proven to be a hoax. Even more recently, roughly 10 years ago, the movie Noah used a lot of these details. The movie Noah was kind of sold to the public as a portrayal of Genesis, but really it was a portrayal of the Book of Enoch. So the point is, this is an idea that is exists in popular culture, but it's really not an idea that comes from the book of Genesis. Genesis further goes on to say that man's days will be 120 years. Another sort of cryptic reference. There was an idea in Sumerian mythology that 120 years was the ideal human lifespan. Any longer than that, and you would kind of start to feel the effects of the negative effects of immortality. Through the Mesopotamian cultures, you have the Epic of Gilgamesh and his quest for immortality, which is constantly portrayed as something not to seek after. So it's an interesting sort of comparison there. Moving on to verse 5, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of their heart was only evil continuously. So the Lord was sorry that he had made mankind on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe out mankind who I have created from the face of the land, mankind and animals as well, and crawling things and the birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for humanity had corrupted its way upon the earth. Looking back to the Nephilim, I've heard commentators try to say that the Nephilim are the reason for the flood. But the text gives us pretty clearly the reason for the flood. The reason for the flood is violence. Violence is the sin that is specifically listed for God's reason for sending this flood. Now, again, we could compare this to the book of Enoch. The book of 1st Enoch portrays this violence as the humans rebelling against the rule by the giants, almost kind of justifying the violence. In the book of Genesis, the reason for the violence isn't given. And if we look back to Eden, violence is not a part of God's intention for creation. And so this violence is given as the reason for the flood. Then God said to Noah, the end of humanity has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of people, and behold, I am about to destroy them within the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with compartments, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and finish it to a cubit from the top, and put the door of the ark on the side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. Get here the dimensions of the ark, very large dimensions for a ship, the cubit being a rough measurement from the tip of the middle finger down to the elbow. The ark is said to be made of gopher wood. The fact is, we don't know what gopher wood is. That's again kind of a direct transliteration. The Septuagint translates that as squared wood, as in like sort of square planks. Some linguists have suggested it could be sort of a mistransliteration, that it should more properly be gopher wood, which it would be sort of wood coated in pitch, which would, be an attempt to waterproof it. Some have drawn some linguistic comparisons to Babylonian or Assyrian terms, thinking it was made of cedar wood or that it was a boat made of reeds. The fact is, we don't really know. I once saw in the past a documentary in which an engineer was trying to do analysis of could the ark have stayed afloat, and I've seen stuff from Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis trying to analyze the buoyancy of the ark. The fact of the matter is, none of that's really valid because we just simply don't know the properties of the material it's constructed from. I think it's very telling that the Ark Encounter is a building and not a boat. Now behold, I myself am bringing the flood of water upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which there is the breath of life from under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall perish, but I will establish my covenant with you. You shall enter the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds according to their kind, and of the animals according to their kind, and of every crawling thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. As for you, take for yourself some of every food that is edible, gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and them. So Noah did these things according to everything God had commanded him, so he did. Jumping into chapter 7, then the Lord said to Noah, enter the ark, you and all your household, for you alone I have seen to be righteous before me in this generation. You shall take with you 7 pairs of every clean animal, a male and his female, and 2 of the animals that are not clean, a male and his female, and also of the birds of the sky 7 pairs, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For after 7 more days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. I will wipe out from the face of the land every living thing that I have made. So Noah acted in accordance with everything that the Lord had commanded him. Interesting little trivia fact. Noah did not bring 2 of every animal. He actually brought 7 pairs of clean animals and 1 pair of every unclean animal. So it's 14 of every clean animals and 14 of every bird as well. And then 2 of every unclean animal. This is the first reference we have to clean and unclean animals, but yet we don't really have the kosher diet here. The connection between clean and unclean seems to be related to whether or not the animal is acceptable for sacrifice, which we will see later after the flood. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood water came upon the earth. Then Noah and his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives with him entered the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of clean animals and animals that are not clean, and birds and everything that crawls on the ground, they all went into the ark to Noah by twos, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. Now it came about after the 7 days that the waters of the flood came upon the earth, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. On that day all the fountains of the great deep burst open, the floodgates of the sky were open, and the rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. As mentioned in earlier chapters, we have this idea of water above and water below here as well. On this very same day, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, entered the ark. They and every animal according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kind, and every crawling thing that crawls on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, all sorts of birds. So they went into the ark to Noah by twos of all flesh, in which there was the breath of life. Those that entered, male and female of all flesh, entered as God had commanded him. The Lord closed the door behind him. Then the flood came upon the earth for 40 days, and the water increased and lifted up the ark so that it rose above the earth. The water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. The water prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered. The water prevailed 15 cubits higher, and the mountains were covered. So all creatures that moved on the earth perished, birds, livestock, animals, every swarming thing that swarms upon the earth, and all mankind. Of all that was on the dry land, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life died. So he wiped out every living thing that was upon the face of the land, from mankind to animals to crawling things, and birds of the sky. They were wiped out from the earth, and only Noah was left, together with those that were with him in the ark. The water prevailed over the earth for 150 days. Starting chapter 8, But God remembered Noah and all the animals and all the livestock that were within the ark, and God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. Remembered here is actually an active term, not a passive term. This isn't God forgetting about Noah and then remembering. It's God taking an act of sort of intentionally remembering Noah. Also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained, and the water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of the 150 days the water decreased. Then in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. And the water decreased steadily until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. Then it came about, the end of 40 days, that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. He sent out a raven. It flew here and there until the water was dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water was low on the surface of the land. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of its foot. So it returned to him in the ark, and the water was on the surface of all the earth. Put out his hand and took it, then brought it into the ark to himself. So he waited another 7 days longer, and again he sent out a dove from the ark. And the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, in its beak was a fresh olive leaf. So Noah knew the water was low on the earth. He waited another 7 days longer, sent out the dove, but it did not return to him again. What you've got here is kind of interesting. Noah's kind of trying to position where the land is as opposed to the water. Ravens were known for flying further than doves would. So the idea is the raven would fly out further looking for land. Once the dove didn't return, he knew dry land was close. The significance of the olive leaf is that olive trees are pretty hardy and yet don't grow at high altitudes. So he knew the olive tree may have survived the flood, and yet it would not have been up in the high mountains, and so he knew the flood and waters were receding down lower. Starting in verse 13, Now it came about in the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st of the month, that the water was dried up from the earth. Then Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground had dried up. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. God spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife, and your son, and your son's wives with you. Bring with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and animals, and every crawling thing that crawls on the earth, that they may breed abundantly on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons, and his wives, and his sons' wives with him. Every animal, every crawling thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by their families from the ark. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and he took some of every kind of clean animal, and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the soothing aroma, and the Lord said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on account of man, for the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth, and I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. This actually has some similarities to some other Mesopotamian stories. For starters, you've got, after the flood, a sacrifice being offered, and God being pleased by that sacrifice. But unlike in the Mesopotamian flood stories, God does not need the sacrifices for sustenance. It is natural to want to draw comparisons to Genesis to these other ancient Near Eastern flood stories. Flood stories themselves, stories about people surviving floods, are almost universal. You see them in ancient Greece, you see them in India, you see stories among Native Americans and among the Welsh. The idea of gigantic floods and the survivors of those floods, that seems to be something that is very widespread in human cultures. Drawing comparisons, though, between Mesopotamia and Genesis because of the connections between those two cultures is, again, something that scholars have been doing for some time now. One of the earliest Mesopotamian flood stories is Eridu Genesis. The Mesopotamian god Enlil, as well as the other gods, want to destroy humanity simply because they're making too much noise. They created mankind and now they're annoyed with mankind making noise. But the Mesopotamian god Enki tells a priest, Ziusudra, to build a boat, bring his family and animals onto it, which saves them. This version of it is very bare bones, but that's the basic outline. A little later, you have the story of Atrahasis. It sort of takes Eridu Genesis and expands upon it. The Epic of Atrahasis, the gods actually start to starve from lack of sacrifice, because in Mesopotamian mythology, the gods needed sacrifice to survive. But fortunately, like in Eridu Genesis, Enki had saved a priest, Atrahasis, who would later become a king, and then that allows the gods to still be sustained by human sacrifices. The Epic of Gilgamesh takes that Epic of Atrahasis and just sort of inserts it into its own narrative. Gilgamesh, while he's questing for immortality, meets a king, Utnapishtim, who had ascended to godhood and gained immortality, so he asks him how he did it. The king tells the story of the gods flooding the earth. Eventually, the Mesopotamian god Ea tells him to demolish his house and turn it into a boat. He brings not just animals and his family, but also a bunch of craftsmen, his expanded family. In the Epic of Gilgamesh's version, the gods are actually frightened by the storm and immediately regret it. Eventually, Utnapishtim uses birds to find land, similar to Noah, and eventually lands near a ziggurat, which he uses to offer sacrifices, and Enlil then gets reprimanded for not thinking things through. And Utnapishtim is rewarded by ascending to godhood and gaining immortality, which he tells Gilgamesh is not all it's cracked up to be, and that Gilgamesh should abandon his quest for immortality. So we have similarities here between these stories and the story of Noah. The similarities are that you have some sort of a divinely sent flood, the people and animals are saved in a boat, and that there are, eventually birds used to find land, and then sacrifices offered to the gods. But there's also a lot of differences between these stories. The Mesopotamian is coming from a polytheistic perspective. The reason for the flood is very different, whereas in the Noah story, the flood is sent in a sense of justice to right the wrong of the violence that is found throughout the earth, whereas in the Mesopotamian myths, the gods are just fickle. The details, like the design of the boat, the people who are on that all is different between them. And in the book of Genesis, God is consistently portrayed as being in control, unlike in the Mesopotamian myths where they're out of control. And obviously Noah does not ascend into godhood in this story. So while these comparisons, like I say, are very interesting and offer us some insight, I think, into the context of what's going on here, I think it is worth mentioning just simply that these are not the same story. These are not, one could potentially be the source for the other, but they are not just the same story copied in two different texts. There are significant differences. And it's worth pointing out, some scholars have argued that, the fact that these two different cultures share a myth of a gigantic flood could potentially imply that there was, in fact, a gigantic flood. Skeptics would say, well, how could it be a worldwide flood? Fair enough. Maybe it was a regional flood. Maybe it was a worldwide flood. Again, as I said, flood myths are almost universal in human cultures. We end with a little poetic section here. While the earth remains, seedtime and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Coming into Genesis chapter 9, then God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every animal of the earth and on every bird of the sky and everything that crawls on the ground and on all the fish of the sea. They are handed over to you. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I have given everything to you as I gave the green plant. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. I certainly will require your lifeblood. From every animal I require it. And from every person, from every man as his brother, I will require the life of a person. ever sheds human blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made mankind. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth abundantly and multiply in it. So you've got here new dietary rules. Humans are allowed to eat meat now. Earlier in Genesis, you have humans being given green plants and plant life for food. Here you have humans eating meat, but you also have this requirement to drain the blood out. In other words, the butchering method is regulated even if animals are allowed to be eaten. Is this some sort of a preview of the kosher diet? Possibly. We also see here a prohibition against violence. Again, that was the reason for the flood, and we see punishments for violence. Could this be a sanctioning of capital punishment? Possibly. It is worth mentioning, though, this is not some universal moral thing, because this was only instituted here with Noah and not prior. God put a mark on Cain to avoid that sort of trading of bloodshed, but here he seems to be sort of saying, yes, if someone sheds blood, their blood shall be shed. Then God spoke to Noah and his sons with him, saying, Now behold, I myself am establishing my covenant with you, and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every animal of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, every animal of the earth. Establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be eliminated by the waters of flood, nor shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, This is the sign of the covenant, which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. I have set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall serve as a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about when I make my cloud appear over the earth, that the rainbow will be seen in the cloud. I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the rainbow is in the cloud, then I will look at it, and I will remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant, which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. To the rainbow as a sign of a covenant. The Noahide covenant in Jewish rabbinical scholarship there is this being a covenant between God and mankind in much the same way that the later covenant at Sinai is a covenant between God and Israel. This is God's covenant with everyone and everything living on earth. Now the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah. From these the whole earth was populated. Then Noah began farming and planted a vineyard. He drank some of the wine and became drunk, and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it on both their shoulders, walked backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, so they did not see their father's nakedness. What does this mean about them seeing their father's nakedness, and what did Ham do exactly? Could this be some sort of lack of respect for his father? Some scholars have suggested something worse, a literal interpretation that just it was wrong for Ham to see his father drunk and naked is supported by Shem and Japheth refusing to look and walking in backwards. Some have argued that there's sort of an implication here that Ham was mocking his father. His father had gotten drunk and was drunk and shameful, and Ham showed a lack of respect by going and telling his brothers about it. It's possible, if we see this just as in a literal sense, that this could be some sort of callback to Adam and Eve, where nudity became shameful at the moment of the fall. The idea that this could be something worse than that is first argued all the way back in the medieval Babylonian Talmud, in which it's argued that Ham committed sodomy or possibly castration of his father. It has also been suggested, due to similar language in Leviticus chapter 20, that this could actually be Ham sleeping with his own mother. Later on we see Canaan being cursed, and so could that be the curse, that sort of that inbreeding, where Ham is mentioned as the father of Canaan here. Canaan's mother is not mentioned, so is this saying that Canaan was inbred. The non-canonical book of Jubilees in chapter 7 has a very similar story, though it actually changes the context of the drunkenness. It places this story in the context of a religious festival. Noah's celebrating a religious festival, he gets drunk, and then whatever happens, happens. But at any rate, something bad happens here. Verse 24, when Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brothers. They often refer to this as the curse of Ham. Now, technically, Ham's not cursed here, though Ham kind of causes the curse. It's Canaan that is cursed. Similar to when we talked about in the earlier chapters of Genesis, how the curse of Cain has nothing to do with race or dark skin or serpent seed or anything like that. The curse of Ham has nothing to do with race or dark skin. That's not something that's in the text at all, but it is something that has worked its way into mostly, I would say, the American church's consciousness. Martin Luther King addressed this, just blatantly calling it blasphemy. The whole idea comes from this medieval European idea that Noah's 3 sons populated the 3 continents that they knew about at that time. The argument was that Japheth populated Europe, Ham populated Africa, and Shem populated Asia. And so the argument then went that the descendants of Ham, Africans, were cursed. And then that's used later on to justify colonizing Africa, taking enslaved people from Africa, and just oppression of people with dark skin. That is not found in the text, though. That's just simply completely foreign to the text. What is found in the text instead is this idea that Canaan and his bloodline were cursed, which is sort of a foreshadowing of the Canaanites as the enemies of the Israelites. Verse 26 says, "He also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." Israelites being descendants of Shem, the Canaanites being descendants of Ham. You have this rivalry, I guess, sort of starting back with these 2 brothers. Verse 28, Noah lived 350 years after the flood, so all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Genesis chapter 10 takes us through what's often called the Table of Nations, where the nations originated. Now these are the records of the generations of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. You're going to have to forgive me if I butcher some names here. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these the people of the coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands, every one according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rema, and Sabteka. And the sons of Rema were Sheba and Dedan. Now, we can guess sort of, or make educated guesses on who some of these people groups were. Gomer was likely up in sort of Europe, some of the Germanic tribes. Magog, some have argued, is sort of Central Asia, or possibly as far north as Russia. Tubal and Meshech, again, Central Asia or Turkey. Tarshish was located all the way over in Western Europe, sort of Portugal and Spain. Cush was a country south of Egypt, sort of modern-day Sudan and Ethiopia. Canaan was, of course, Canaan. Put was Libya. Mizraim, that was the Canaanites and the Philistines. Sheba and Dedan were the sort of on the Arabian Peninsula. The point being that these nations were nations that the Israelites, at the time this was written, would have known. This really is an attempt to account for every single nation on the earth. It was an attempt to account for the nations that the Israelites knew about. It's a reflection of the Israelites' world, and not necessarily the entire world. Verse 8, Now Cush fathered Nimrod. He became a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, mighty hunter before the Lord. That's probably alluding to some sort of a saying or idiom that was common at the time. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Ir, Calah, and Resen between Nineveh and Calah, that is the great city. Some have tried to identify Nimrod as Gilgamesh or Enmerkar, another figure in Mesopotamian mythology. We'll come back to this next time, actually, but just a little preview for you there. But the point is, this is telling the story of the founding of Babylon. Mizraim fathered Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtuhim, Pathrusim, Casluhim, from who came the Philistines. Again, there's a group that the Israelites would know about, and so it's accounting for that. And Caphtorim. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, the Amorite, the Girgashite, the Hivite, the Arkite, the Sinite, the Arvadite, the Zimarite, and the Hamathite. And afterwards the families of the Canaanite were spread abroad. Territory of the Canaanite extended from Sidon, going toward Gerar as far as Gaza, going toward Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham according to their families, according to their languages, and by their lands and by their nations. So this is accounting for the Canaanites. The author, in a way, is saying, hey, this is going to be important later, so remember this. Also to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, and the older brother of Japheth, children were born. The sons of Shem were Elam, Asher, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram were Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. 2 sons were born to Eber. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided. And his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan fathered Almodad, Shelaph, Hazarmaveth, Jera, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All of these were the sons of Joktan. Now their settlement extended from Mesha going towards Sephar, the hill country of the east. These are the sons of Shem according to their families, according to their languages, by their lands, according to their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah according to their descendants, by their nations, and out of these nations were separated on the earth after the flood. So we're continuing towards Israel and kind of setting the stage for the world that the Israelites would have known. So there I'm about twice as long as I usually go on these episodes. So that'll be a good place to stop for today. So we covered the story of Noah and the Table of Nations in one episode. And so next we'll talk about the Tower of Babel. See you next time, and thank you for joining me.